to some degree with the four horsemen of the atheist world and is a dramatist, and so understands, at least in his bones, the necessity of this underlying poetic, dramatic, religious, humanistic matrix out of which rationality has emerged and in which rationality must remain embedded. I mean, what it looks like to me is that, and I see this dawning realization among people like Richard Dawkins as well, at least by proxy, talking to people who know him and watching what's happened to him with the humanists, for example, who attacked him, is that this insistence on pure rationality and pure Enlightenment rationality doesn't address the fundamental religious impulse. And the hope was among the four horsemen of the atheist world, let's say, that once we dispensed with this irrational superstition, we'd all become materialist rationalists, of the intellectual caliber of Steven Pinker. But that isn't what's happening. I don't believe that that can be the case. What happens instead is that all sorts of things that religion should be separated from, the higher life, the spiritual life, the religious life, all of that falls down a level or two, and pure politics becomes contaminated with the religious impulse. And then it becomes totalizing. And that looks like a catastrophe. And so it seems to me that we need to pull up the spiritual domain again to parse it off as a separate field of what? Endeavor, study, hope, to give it its due. And that's the role, at least in part, that the universities should be playing. Instead, they're tearing things down.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it needs to be said. I mean, these technology is an amazing tool. That's what it is. It is a tool. It does not have a moral value in itself. There's no question that it largely, well, it is morally in what is the word I'm looking for? It doesn't have a moral determination intrinsic to itself. But so that is to say, even from the standpoint of this kind of narrow instrumental rationalism, you still are putting this in service of something that you think that you think is good. It's good to feed people, but you have to ask yourself, why do we think peace is better than war, or why is it that forgiveness is better than vengeance, or that unity is better than disunity, or that beauty is better than ugliness? This is a point that I know we both are very keen about. Maybe we can talk about beauty in a minute, but the point I'm making is that is twofold.
That's relevant to that central animating spirit of mankind, let's say, because that central animating spirit accepts all those propositions that you just laid out as givens, that beauty is preferable to ugliness, that unity is preferable to disunity, that life more abundant is preferable to privation. And that's all part of our central ethic. And that's part of the central ethic of our properly functioning institutions as well. And it's part of the central ethic that enables us to communicate about what's good and what's evil. And it's part of the central ethic that allows our consciences to torment us when we deviate from that path. And that's not merely a matter of aberration from a central power drive.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real question, the West, the world at large, could very easily become a technological order set over a moral vacuum. And this is not to denigrate the technology, but actually
then it'll destroy itself, right?
Look. I mean, it's very easy to point that out. I mean, we can. The National Socialists was a very largely technological regime. Nuclear war is the creation of technology. The gene modifying technology, biowarfare. These are all things that were either there or almost there, with the capacity to wreak unimaginable suffering on the entire planet because of the technology. That's not to say the technology is bad. It is to say rather that it must take its place relative to a higher order series of conversations. And what I absolutely want to insist on is that those higher order conversations, they're not mere intuitions. They're not mere, speculative. Oh, we can just kind of, consult the entrails of a goose or something.
They're also not mere expressions of the arbitrary desire for power, because that's not the central animating spirit. That isn't why you built that isn't why you're trying to build Ralston College. It isn't to fulfill your own desire for power. That's not a good motivation. It's not pleasing. It doesn't last. It's not enriching. It's what people turn to when they're bitter and cynical and feel that there's nothing left but the exploitation of others for momentary pleasure. You can't be more cynical than that. And so
Yes.
then we also have to ask ourselves, why the hell did we get so cynical about ourselves? It doesn't, I mean,
Gosh,
look,
that is such a good
do you
question.
remember?
That is such a
Do you
good
remember
question.
in that debate with Zizek? There was a piece that we're going to clip out, but it's part of something I already clipped out of a 15-minute piece of that debate. I talked about the Communist Manifesto as a call to bloody, violent revolution, and a significant proportion of the audience, who were obviously pro-Marxist and had come to hear Zizek hopefully defend their hero, cheered and laughed when I talked about bloody, violent revolution. And, you know, it's also the case that once you make the look, I've been trying to understand, for example, when the left goes too far. You know, where's the cutoff line? It's very difficult to draw. But the problem with the insistence that power structures everything is that as soon as you insist upon that, you can't help but justify your own use of power. And then that, for me, as a psychoanalytic thinker, let's say, then that makes me suspicious that perhaps that's the motivation for the entire bloody argument. It's like, well, everything's about power, so it's perfectly fine for me to express power in whatever way I see fit, especially if I'm serving the oppressed or I'm serving some higher moral order. But really what I'm trying to do is to find a justification for my expression of naked power. And you could see the enjoyment in the crowd when that phrase about bloody, violent revolution popped out. It's like, yes, it's really, that's what you want. And who is it exactly here that's animated by the desire for power? And so, I mean, is the driving force behind the insistence that all our social institutions are based on power the desire to justify power as a political weapon?
That is indubitably a significant part of the attraction, though I think it takes its strength fundamentally morally from the perception that this mode of analysis can help us redress suffering.
You insisted earlier, and I was speaking with someone else who made the same case very recently. I can't remember who it was, but it'll come to me.